Welcome to the Long-Term Care Chronicles podcast.
Thank you so much, Julia, for coming on to the Long-Term Care Chronicles, for speaking on John's campaign. And I'll get you just to, before we start, to say a little something about yourself and, of course, about John's campaign.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's actually very exciting to be part of something, that stretches so many thousands of miles. But I think, that what we're talking about here are human truths and sort of challenges of the clash between the individual and the corporate, and the feeling and the sort of the dead hand of officialdom, I'm afraid. But no, John's campaign is myself and my friend Nikki, and we started several years ago when Nikki's father, who was living with dementia, had to go into hospital for something very minor. But because there was a norovirus outbreak in that hospital, they took that knee-jerk action of saying, all right, no visitors. And Nikki's family wish they'd never listened. They wish they'd challenged this, because their father, who was 86, he was a doctor. He'd been living well with Alzheimer's. He could. You have a conversation. Give you a game of chess. But once he was in the hospital without his family and away from his familiar surroundings, he simply, as Nikki says, went off a cliff. He lost his ability to move, to speak, to recognize, to be continent, to feed himself. He lost a third of his body weight. And this was so fast. And of course, he must have been suffering from a delirium, but not the sort of delirium, where you get, very obviously distressed, but that one where you just lie very, very quietly. And of course, nobody would have known that wasn't his normal self. And so by the time his family discovered what was happening, they were saying, oh, well, he better stay longer for rehabilitation. And of course, that was entirely the wrong thing. And he never recovered. He was in the hospital for 5 weeks when it should have been, sort of 2 or 3 days. And he had to have 24-hour care, because when you're living with dementia, if you don't use those faculties, your well-being and your practiced use of the things you can still do are just absolutely vital. So we started the campaign that in the same way as if a child is in a hospital, a parent is welcome and essential, in fact. We said that should be the same for anybody who was vulnerable. We particularly focus on people living with dementia, but we don't forget that the many people, who are vulnerable for many. And I really don't like that word, vulnerable. They just have particular needs, which can be best satisfied by having somebody who knows them really well and who can help them, communicate. So that's what we did. We're not a charity. We're not paid. We're not full time. We just, I suppose, we just advocate. But we find that we're able to speak for a lot of other people who have experience the same thing. So I think that's where the power of John's campaign comes from. We're just a sort of mouthpiece. Nikki's a particularly wonderful writer, so that's a particularly great help. And so over the course of the next few years, we did persuade all the hospital trusts to make a voluntary pledge to say we will always welcome the carers of people with dementia, or we will always welcome carers, which was a better one. And we thought that was going quite well. But the trouble is, because it was a voluntary pledge, it very much depended on the people who'd made the pledge, the degree of understanding and ownership from them and their colleagues, and whether they then moved jobs. So in the pandemic, we have sadly found that quite a number of hospitals have forgotten their pledges, and people, carers, are routinely turned away. We have found luckily that when if I ask somebody, I say, okay, what hospital is it? And I said, well, actually, I think if you talk to the lead dementia nurse there and you remind her of her John's Campaign pledge, so that it has meant something, and it continues to mean something, but it's not it's not what it should be. Really, in hospitals, as in anywhere else, including care homes, which I will come to, people who are living with something like dementia are living with a disability. Therefore, by law, by the Equality Act over here, they should have particular accommodations made, reasonable adjustments made, so that the disadvantages that their condition gives them, can be compensated for. So actually, John's Campaign shouldn't have needed to be there in hospitals. It should legally be there anyway. But there we are. We never thought that this would be needed in care homes, because at that point, Nikki's father had been living at home and cared for at home, and my mother was living in what's called very sheltered accommodation, which meant it was sort of like you rent a little flat, and carers come in a couple of times a day. But we started to hear from people that whilst they had been welcomed in the hospital to be involved in care, and I might mean properly involved in care, like helping to change a continence pad, do actual hands-on stuff if they chose to. There's no obligation, it's a choice. Carers do stuff out of love, and they must only do what they feel comfortable with doing, otherwise it doesn't work. So we were finding that people who'd been welcomed to care in hospital when the hospital had signed up to John's Campaign, then perhaps if the person they looked after wasn't able to come home because illness doesn't stop, and then had to go into residential care, they were suddenly finding all sorts of unfriendlinesses, unwelcomenesses. So at that point we started a different sort of campaign, but a more sort of hearts and minds campaign, and I was the one of us more involved with this. Nikki had better knowledge of hospitals, because my mother's dementia then became so distressing that she couldn't continue to live in extra care. She needed to go where there were carers on hand 24 hours of the day, and that was a terrible moment. And I think everybody who's had that moment in their lives has found it a very difficult one. And because I'm not an optimist, I kept saying, look, if we manage this right, it's just a change of address. It's just your illness needs this special care. You're moving from a place without the special care to another home that has this additional level of care. And I truly believe that's what it should be like, just a change of address. But you also have to remember that for many people, it's a last change of address. Therefore, it's terribly important that it shouldn't be a goodbye at the door, like the old workhouse or something. It should be a sort of a watershed, maybe, but somewhere where you reevaluate your relationship, you work out which things you need still to be involved with and do. And I was so lucky, I now realise, that when my mother, she lived the last 2.5 years of her life in nursing care, and I was in there twice a day. I made friends in there. I helped, I think. I know, and the staff would agree, that I helped enormously, because I could spend 3/4 of an hour persuading Mum to eat one bit of toast, exactly. or I could brush her teeth, where she would bite somebody else who wanted to brush her teeth because she was frightened. She was terribly frightened, and that's the awful thing about dementia for many people. Is the person is so frightened, and so low in themselves that you get a whole new understanding of the term well-being and what constitutes well-being and why it's different from health. And you can't halt this terminal illness, but you can do your best to support well-being.
Yes.
So when we got to last March in this country, and families were simply turned away, I find it very hard to believe that this would happen, but it did.
Thank you for that. And so with this, and I want to continue on that, is with this, in this pandemic, the fact that family caregivers have been turned away. How is the John's campaign managing with all the inquiries that are coming in as to how families should mobilize themselves, and how do they move forward with this?
Well, we do what we can do. Nikki had written a wonderful book called What Dementia Teaches Us About Love, and that had come into paperback just last spring. So it was very easy for her to have a platform and to say very clearly, and there's a video clip of her saying it on BBC, that for people living with dementia, there are worse things. And I think it was very brave and right of her to say it at that point, because at that point we were all very scared of COVID-19. We all thought it would be like the Black Death and the plague and all of that. And she said that disconnection was worse for people with dementia. Potentially, it was worse than the risk of infection. But so that was our case. I wrote quite a lot about what an essential family carer did, because families come, as everybody knows, in all shapes and sizes, like care homes and care staff and people who live in care homes. We're just a mass of individuals. Every time you generalize, you're going to make a mistake. But so there are people like me and others like me, but perhaps not the majority, who went in daily and did either hands-on physical care or essential emotional care, just as important. So that's one type of caregiver. And it became apparent to me that many people were simply unaware that this was what families did. Care staff might know, but managers and providers and people at the Department of Health had absolutely no idea that somebody like me would go and clean my mum's teeth twice a day. They just didn't know what family carers did. And so I felt very early on that what we needed was what some friends in hospitals in Scotland had established for their hospitals, which is a my visiting plan. That when anybody moves in to residential care, and like in these particular hospitals, it was anybody arrives at hospital, there's a form. What would you like? You, the person who's moving in. What would you like for your visit? Who matters to you? What might they do? And of course, there's any number of permutations on that. So come the pandemic, I would also have added a little bit to the bottom to say, and what's the situation of the person, who might be visiting? Because again, we vary so much, but again, I think it hasn't fully been realized that for many people, the people who are the most distressed by all this, because we have to remember that there are quite a lot of families who are not distressed by this. But for those of us who are distressed by this, there were people, perhaps an elderly spouse, whose life revolved round going in to see their husband or wife every afternoon. And perhaps they were quite doddery themselves. Perhaps they couldn't, hop up and down and, help make the bed or, do anything like that. But the very fact that they came was central to their own self-respect and their feeling that they were fulfilling the really important pledges that were made. I think the way that people's personal commitments have been just knocked aside, I think that's terribly damaging. When somebody moves in to live in residential or long-term care, if you love them, you say, look, it's just a change of address. I'm still there for you. I still love you. You need this extra help because you're ill, and neither of us can do anything about that. But don't worry, I'll be there for you. And that matters absolutely in your heart and in your head. And if you're somebody who've married somebody and you've said, I'm going to love and cherish you till death do us part, that matters in your heart and your head. And I am appalled that has been knocked out. And the stingy language, oh, we know this is so difficult for you. It's not difficult. It's crucifying. It's absolutely, I don't see how we can look ourselves in the face and say we are an ethical society. I just wonder what principles we're living by. If so, that was my feeling, that there were quite simple practical things that could be done. People's individual relationships could be looked at and inspected and respected, and for the people who don't have nearby family, that they would then need that extra help. And I've always thought that in good times and bad, that the people who don't have anybody coming in need something to make them feel individual and special. And the people whose families maybe came in once a week on a Sunday afternoon, that matters too. So all this range of things could easily have been looked at if people looked at individuals, if they didn't look at masses, if they didn't look at, oh gosh, there's nearly 500,000 care home residents. No, there's 500,000 individual people who happen to live in care home. They're not a different species called residents. They're just people living in a place. Anyway, so that was our cry, actually, right from the beginning. And I think other people will say that it just so happened because it's Nikki and I, we were able to be quick. We were able to say what we thought. We didn't have to consult anybody. We said what we thought right from the beginning. And because we were already there, I'd had a meeting in February with a whole group of care home managers trying to see how we could, give more, have a better experience for families in care homes, so we were there, and so we were able to be active. But it wasn't until into the summer that we actually resorted to lawyers. Before that, we tried politicians, we tried bishops. I wrote to all the bishops in England. I wrote to. Didn't really get anywhere, but
So going back to the summer, because I know back in July 2020, the government changed the laws to allow for the local councils to have the powers. And how did that change? Did that make it a little bit better at that time?
No, it made it much, much worse. In July, we got together with the other dementia charities, and we collectively wrote a letter to the government because care homes had a pretty awful time. They'd not been well supported in practical ways. They'd been blitzed by conflicting guidance and advice. They had mainly been keeping families out. They'd had a lot of deaths. They were very traumatized, and they needed a nice, firm steer to say, look, it's okay. We're behind you. Welcome the families in. This is what you should be doing. Trust us. And what they got. So we wrote to the government. We didn't get an answer, of course, but it's a way of putting on pressure. Eventually, at the end of July, this dreadful bit of guidance came out that was so badly written. It was incoherent. You really couldn't. I myself worked with a group called the National Care Forum, and we'd put out some guidance earlier for care providers, which we hoped, would be a sort of model of the sort of thing, you could have, like having individual appreciations of people. We've done that. One or two good companies like the Methodist Homes for the Aged had put out some ideas for essential family carers. The things were out there, but the quality, I was really shocked, because in England we like to sort of think, oh, we've got such good civil servants. Well, quite honestly, Wendy, they were rubbish. Absolute rubbish. It was so badly written, absolutely impossible to understand. You could get anything you liked out of it. So, in fact, there were the good things that we'd shoved in from the National Care Forum. They were all in there. You didn't have to do anything. Nothing had to be done. And then there was this sudden out of the blue saying, oh, and by the way, local directors of public health can just step in to close down care home visiting if they want to, and no care homes should be doing visiting without the say-so direct, which is just plain bonkers, absolutely bonkers, when you're talking about people, individual people, living with a multiplicity of conditions, and what I would argue is the most intimate of all illnesses. Dementia attacks the brain that people they've been constructing. You and I, every day we construct a bit of our brains. Somebody who's living in a care home has been constructing their brain all their life, through all their experiences, all their relationships, and then this illness comes and attacks the physical makeup of their brain. So obviously they're going to it is the most individual and intimate. Brain illness is awful. So how some blessed director of public health, understanding an awful lot about bacteria and infections and drains and things, should then take it upon him or herself to pronounce upon the individual well-being of these thousands of men and women. It's just appalling. Anyway, there we are. That was a very bad time. And what was really bad was it meant that those summer months, June, July, August, September, when there was fresh air, when infection rates were dropping, they were wasted, completely wasted. It was heartbreaking. I went to so many meetings, and I said, we must help people, we must build up people's resilience, build up their sense of themselves, their confidence, and it didn't happen. And for instance, there was no guidance on how people would be able to come out of a care home, like to go for a walk in the countryside, or go and sit in your daughter's garden, or walk by the river, anything. And so there was an imprisonment that has continued pretty well to this day, and that's a very shocking thing in itself.
Yeah, because I know that we did see some indications over the summer that some people were able to at least visit outside, but they had these constructions outside of the building sometimes, or window visits. Is that correct as well in some locations?
Oh yeah. There's this idea that looking through the window at somebody counts as a visit. They're pushing language a bit here. That's not a visit. And
No.
to say that trying to do Skype or FaceTime with somebody who doesn't understand it, that is apparently a visit. Well, it's not. I'm talking to you. I'm not visiting you.
Exactly.
And we're able to understand each other. We've struggled, but we've got our heads around the technology. But in a few years' time, I'm not going to be able to. I find it quite difficult now. If my mum couldn't use a mobile phone, it's ridiculous.
It's all those different challenges. And now just recently in January the 6th, 2021, where the government made changes to regulation number 3 in terms of the visitation, and they acknowledged the essential caregiver. Like, is this now being acknowledged by the local councils, or is this still what you would experience back in the summer?
Well, in September was when we actually hired lawyers, and we had a crowdfunded campaign, and people put money into a legal pot. So in September, we started asking for a judicial review, because the guidance was so bad that it was actually illegal, because it forgot things like the Equality Act. You cannot issue guidance for a huge group of disabled people without any reference to the Equality Act. It also missed out on the Mental Capacity Act because family members have responsibilities and should be consulted and are not being consulted. But the government guidance forgot that. It also forgot the little matter of Human Rights Act and keeping things proportionate. And also we have a thing called the Care Act, which says that care homes have a duty to promote well-being. So just as you were saying when we were chatting earlier about how people deteriorate, the evidence was absolutely clear. By late spring, it was absolutely this massive deterioration, and the excess deaths were absolutely, couldn't be argued with. So we then, went through a sort of legal process, and actually it was by late October, November, when the country was moving into another sort of lockdown, but actually the guidance from the Department of Health and Social Care got better. It reminded people that there are laws, and it reminded people that they should observe these laws. And it absolved itself from responsibility in not a very responsible way, but it did remind care providers. And it did start to say that the role of directors of public health was to advise and support, not just to close down. But that's not a message that's really got out there. And actually, by December, it seemed that the message had got through. The guidance was much better. Test kits were sent into care homes specifically for families to use, so they could have proper indoor visits. They could maybe even hold somebody's hand. But at that point, we did a survey because, sadly, we've discovered that there's a big gap between, the public rhetoric and the individual experience. And our survey told us that individual, because the guidance was now advocating individual risk assessments and care plans, in fact, and this was simply not happening. So that was all rather depressing. We had about 1,000 people responding to the survey. We've given it to anybody who wants it. We try to offer it to Health Watch, to anybody who wants it can have the data. We also sent the data to the 5 biggest care home providers because we noticed that their results were significantly worse because they're just because of the way they are with them. It does make you think a lot about how care is structured
Yes.
in this country. But it's been since Christmas that the gloom has there was this moment of hope, that despite the tiering restrictions across the country, despite the fact that infections were on the rise again, that the particular needs of people living in care homes had been recognised. And some people did experience, proper indoor hand-holding visits, and that was shown on the telly and everybody felt hopeful. But the cruel truth was that was still only a small proportion. And since the beginning of January, even that has been pretty well wiped out. So the guidance has got better. It's just, you couldn't make it up.
Oh my. So I guess with your legal campaign, that really did help in terms of being able to change in terms of the guidance. Is that correct?
Very kindly, other people have said if John's campaign hadn't gone to law about it, the changes wouldn't have happened. But then other groups like Rights for Residents have been absolutely terrific on their sort of Daily Mail media campaign. They've really worked at the public awareness. And the Relatives and Residents Association, have solidly put their case to things like parliamentary committees. They've done very well on that, and they have a sort of advice line, and some properly funded, proper advice. So there's different groups of us, and of course the charities like Age UK and the Alzheimer's Society, they also work in their different way. And yes, so recently we came together quite quietly, just a half a dozen of us, and evaluated the situation. We feel that if only, and I know that everybody's saying this, if there was some sort of exit strategy, and that's not being unrealistic, and that's understanding that there are new and developing strains of the virus, all these dreadful things, but it still wouldn't be beyond the wit of man in this what now seems like a relatively small group of people to start with. 440,000 care home residents, it seemed like a large group of people. Actually, when you think about 8 million school children, it seems like quite a small group of people. And there are absolutely clear ways in which they could be helped. It's all there. It could be done. And the messages about the vaccine need to be very much clearer. We're now told that all our over 80s who consent, and that's a bit of a thing, but all the over 80s who consent will have been vaccinated, had their first vaccination by the middle of February. Now that's, that sounds great, but then in the next breath we're told, but it won't make any difference. And so we say, but why not? Why not? If this matters, if these are people living often in the last year or years of their lives, if they've been prioritized for injections, then kick the ball into the net, make it make a difference. Don't just do it and say, oh, well, we've done it, but it didn't make any difference. Make it make a difference. And that's not impossible.
Exactly. And then how is that whole vaccination rollout going for care homes, for essential caregivers? Is that being done together, or is that seen as separate?
Well, sadly, Wendy, the whole concept of essential caregiver hasn't really grasped it at all. So only this morning I was looking on Twitter and I was seeing my friend Vic Rayner saying great news, care home staff are going to be able to self-test at home. There's going to be a clear structured regime for this and everything made available. And I just thought, no mention of families. It's as if we just don't count. For a lot of the time last year, I was just shouting at the telly because they said care home residents and staff, care home residents and staff. And no, there are 3 people in this relationship. There's care home residents, there are care home staff, and there are the people who make those people's life worth living. And I sometimes just say, let's just see who matters most here. If it were not for the people who had gone to live in this place, those staff, those companies wouldn't be in business. Those people's wishes should be absolutely prioritized. And they're adult people. They're our most senior citizens. Some of them are people who lived with us through who fought for us in the Second World War. These should be the people for whom we feel absolute respect, however ill their brains have become. And what they want should be what we should do. And not keep them safe as if they're sort of babies or eggs or something. They're adults, and we forget that.
No, that's so true, because it just as I said to you before, it's just very heartbreaking to see what is happening, and I guess you could say the lack of respect that is going on as well. It's a massive lack of respect. So I know that you had mentioned as well that you're working with different groups, such as Rights for Residents, in terms of getting the information out to family members. How is that going? What else are you doing with those? I know you mentioned another group, but how is that going, your work with those groups?
I think everybody does their own thing. I mean, I also work with other groups. I've got a little group of care home managers, and I consult them. I've got various groups of family members who I consult, because I no longer have a mother living in a care home. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a social care professional. So, I need to listen to what people are saying, and I need to, think about it and express it. And, I've no wish to demonize the care home sector, because, there are some wonderful people in there. And I have friends, who work in there, as well as friends who live in there, or friends who have other people living in there. I think everything that splits us up is a bad thing. But on the other hand, we can all only do what we can do. And so I think Jenny and Diane at Rights for Residents have become absolutely brilliant at supporting the people who go directly to them. They're just families. They're not hospitals. They're not care home managers. They're not anything else. They're just family, and they do, a really fabulous advocacy job. But then I look at my friend Vic at the National Care Forum, and and I see what she's trying to do, and what we have to find are the points of contact. And I think a point of contact that we can all feel, and the charities, I'd like to feel, the government even might think this, I don't know, that this must never happen like this again, that we something has to shift, that we can never have this degree of distress. We've got a massive reckoning to come with people's emotional health and their self-esteem and their deep grief and bereavement. And we don't, as I said to you, I'm 66. I get my state pension. Eventually, I expect, because I'm a woman, I'm very healthy in lots of ways, I'm very likely to get dementia. And my mum always used to say, I know it's not PC to say you suffer with dementia, but you do suffer. And that was the word. She wrote us a letter, which we sent to all the hospitals when we began the campaign. And I can see this happening to me. I don't want to blight the life of my family. I want to, in so many ways, moving into a care home is a dignified, it should be a dignified and loving thing to do, because you're saying to your dear ones, look, I'll be okay, you get on with your lives. And they say to you, but Mum, yes, we have our lives to lead, but we still love you, don't worry, we'll be there. That's how it should be, and that's, it's not unachievable. And it's what surely we would all, of course, I would like to think that I'm not going to get, and dementia, then happens in so many ways. My mother was very post-traumatic from her wartime experiences. Therefore, she became very paranoid, very violent, and distress. Her distress was her emotions were extreme. She had a very healthy body, so she was very vigorous, but she was extraordinarily alive, whilst being extraordinarily ill. So that it wasn't a happy moment when she moved in, and she was very, very angry with me. But it worked out for us, and as I was telling you, her death was a good death, and that's the sort of dignified and loving death that I would want for myself.
And talking further on that, with what is happening, and the fact that, let's say, family members are not able to be there for the last moments of their loved ones during this pandemic, so they're not experiencing, or they're not being or taking part of in that good death. What are you hearing about that as well with this pandemic?
Well, I mean, the one success we did have early on was in May of last year, when there was a very clear directive from Matt Hancock that people were to be allowed in to say goodbye. So it's that was a clear directive, but of course death doesn't really listen to that. Death doesn't say, oh well, fine, so it'll be convenient for you to call between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday, will it? Fine. Oh, okay, I'll die then because there's been so many awful things of people saying, oh well, we were going to call the family in, but she just died. And so that's quite bad. And the important thing, which I do think there has been a major shift in the Department of Health and Social Care. If you read the most recent guidance, it's really strong on the fact that end of life is a phase of life. It's not the single moment of dying. It's like saying, that infancy, the early childhood is a phase of life. And, an infant, let's call the person that, maybe that covers, the first year or two of a person's life. It's different from the act of birth. The act of death is a specific, if you don't get it right this time, you've got no more chances. That's it. But the end of life period is the period when you do have a chance to get it right, and you do have a chance to get it emotionally right, but also, as you and I were talking earlier, a loving family member, if he or she wishes, can be such a practical help, because death can be a very slow process, and you don't know when it's going to come, and you can sit there for a week, but during that week you will be observing that person. So from your point of view, that's good, because this is the last time you're going to see that person. So you're drinking them in as you watch them. And it's the time that they know, however far away they might seem, somewhere, I think, because the sense of hearing goes last, I think they know that you're there with them. This time last year, I was sitting with my mother-in-law in hospital, and it suddenly dawned on me, and I don't know how it dawned on me, she was a very religious woman, that I should be reading prayers to her. And so sort of, I got hold of a prayer book from somewhere and read it to her. And it made a difference to her, and it made a difference to me. And when the moment passed, then I put the prayer book away again. But there were also practical things. When people are dying, the saliva gets very sort of thick and horrible. And if you're there, you can either, if you're very expert, try to remove it yourself, or you can call a nurse and say, look, I'm sorry, but it's really bubbly now. She's really getting distressed by it. And the nurse, with her expertise, can say, oh, fine, I'll put a little bit more of, whatever the stuff is. And it's the same with pain. You're there, you're watching, you can see when a little bit of morphine is needed. You go and ask for it. A nurse can't sit there for the week that it might take. It's so silly. We're our hospitals, our care homes, the staff are run ragged. And if it was a war, we would be turning around and we're saying, okay, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, they're absolutely at their extremes. Come on, chaps, you can help. Why are we not doing that? We can help. We would help. And it would make us feel better to help. Even if it was something really very, very minor, we would like to help. And it's so silly not to.
And that's where you feel that, initial connection. So you don't, because as you mentioned before, there's a lot of distress added, and a lot of people will feel guilt if they were not there for their loved ones as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think that the huge internal pain that's being caused is really unbelievable. It's not something I could ever have imagined before. And of course, one has to remember that all families are different. Not everybody loved their mum, and not everybody wished to maintain a connection, with the husband when he became violent with dementia. You can't legislate for everybody, but what we're not doing is recognizing the choices of people and their own responsibility for their own consciences, and their own people they do care about, and that's a very wrong thing to do, and that's something I'm not sure I've ever seen that, because that's not what happens in a war. I'm a writer. I'm writing about World War II at the moment, and so that helps me keep things in proportion. But the differences are absolutely stark. And in wartime, everybody had to do their bit. In this, we're just told everything is negative. You must just stay away. You must not do anything. You mustn't go and see your mother. You mustn't bother the care home. You mustn't take little parcels to the door. Don't do anything. And that's a very inhumane and very difficult and very damaging thing, which I don't think, as a social experiment, I don't think that's really been tried before, telling people
No,
to do nothing.
exactly. No. And would you say for the care homes that are either in a major city or the ones that are rural, are they both experiencing the same thing and having the same stressors?
It's an extraordinarily complex picture, but I do believe that the quality of the manager of the care home is the single most important factor. But having said that, I accept that some care homes in the early stages, when the virus was particularly virulent in certain areas, did have a particularly awful time. So no doubt they're post-traumatic themselves, but if you were to ask me to look across the whole of the 4 countries of the United Kingdom, I would say that the care homes that are very centrally managed, they're in a large chain, and their managers have been told, you do what head office tells you. I think they're a particular case which we really should be looking rather hard at. And that's not to say they don't have some very, very good people in those head offices. But again, I come down to the quality of the individual choice. And next door to each other, you can see care homes. One is coping and one is not. And I'm not putting it all down to individual managers, because some of them are having to manage with their hands tied behind their back, and some of them are working in places where staffing has been so ground down, that they've not got that quality backup. And yeah, some of them are working in places where the virus has been particularly virulent, but that was more obvious last year. This year, I think it's pretty well everywhere, but there are still people who are coping better than other people.
So I take it then you would say for the ones that are, let's say, run by Change, which are for profit, are probably more damaging than the ones that are non-for-profit at this point. Is that becoming clear?
I think it is. I think it is. I don't want to say that because when my mother was living in her place, it was, to start with, it was owned by a relatively small company, and it had a very good manager who was able to do as she thought best, and she had a very good stable staff, and she listened, and it was just all fine. And then it was taken over by a very big company, and although my personal relationships with the carers and with the other people who lived there were fine, and I did meet, and I still know, very good people who work in their head office, somehow the experience of corporate management was extraordinarily damaging, and it went from being, a care home rated good to a care home in the requires improvement bracket in about 12 months. And so that's not me saying, that was the results speaking for themselves. I'm not saying that there are not types of corporate management which could release the talents of individuals, and that's what good management should be like. But unfortunately, the model of corporate management which we tend to have tends to be edicts sent out, and very little encouragement for people to use their own initiative, and I think that's a very great pity. But I think that would happen also if they were managed by the local council. So I've sat in, I've listened to local council members with their, I live in Essex, with the few care homes that are managed by Essex, and I was frankly appalled, absolutely appalled. So I'm not saying that there's an easy answer there. I think care homes should be well managed, but not for profit. For working profit, so a working, and I do think that there are models that could be used. The big ones, it's almost like it's just a form of property management. If you find something else to put in these great big places, you put something else in there. Oldies happen to be quite profitable, but if they're not, well, we'll use it for something else.
Exactly. And then so taking on that, so in terms of the model of care, should that then be kind of like similar to a national standard, as opposed to just regional standards set out for each care home?
I go back, Wendy, to saying that these are places for individuals. Even a whole care home it's a community, but it's a community of individuals. It's not a corporate entity. I know that somehow it must feel like that, but it isn't. It's the really, when my mother first moved into an extra care facility, I had a lovely conversation with the person who managed it, and she said, think of that corridor as a street. Think of each door as going into somebody's individual house, and they'll all be different. And I would like, and of course, a care home itself is not quite the same as that. You don't, for instance, have a tenancy agreement, but I think we do have to look rather carefully at the contracts and there's a sort of nitty gritty, and we must always remember, I think, that these are adults' homes where yes, they need extra care, but they're not babies. They are people who should still have agency, even if the agency has to be managed for them by somebody close to them. That they're not a mass of amorphous folks to be sort of pushed around either in a beneficial way or a non-beneficial way. You can still. Mum was awful. She used to go sort of running off down to the river in her nightie, and people would sort of ring up, and in the end, we found a social worker who said, look, actually, she still has a choice. If she wants to run down to the river in her nightie, we'll keep an eye on her. We might follow her at a discreet distance, but she's still allowed. It's probably a jolly silly idea, but she's still allowed to do it, and that seemed to me to be, a way to go, really.
No, definitely to be more individualized to the actual person, and that's the way. So, in regard, I know you had mentioned many times about the dementia care. So, with this pandemic, we're not going to get to the end of it, and probably not until the end of the year, into maybe next year. So how now should dementia care be done going forward, especially during this pandemic?
Well, that's the terribly sad thing. In this country, over the last, I would say, 10 years, or maybe it's more than 10 years now, there have been huge advances, I think, in the understanding of dementia. There has been a degree of destigmatization for dementia, but it seemed, well, we hoped that the understanding is that best dementia care puts the person with dementia at the centre, which is where they should be, recognises that it's an illness, therefore this person needs professional medical help. It's a physical illness manifesting itself in emotional and intellectual ways, and they also need support for their well-being, because well-being, that indefinable quality, can either speed up or slow down dementia care. With COVID-19, you can have a vaccine. You can get COVID-19, you can get better. I think people forget how many people living in care homes have survived COVID-19. And nobody thought to say, oh, well, that's wonderful. I think you have a little bit of protection now. Why don't we have your daughter in? We need to be quite clear that dementia is incurable. There's no vaccine. It's terminal. Now, you can either make it worse or you can ease it along as best you can. And how can anybody think that it's all right? So, oh, well, it's all right. We'll just shut her away for a year or so, because then she'll be there. Well, she won't be there, because that's not how dementia works. And actually, there is a lovely saying, get it right for dementia, and you get it right for everybody. Dementia is a sort of a version of humanity. And if you treat everybody as if they might incipiently have dementia, because we've all got our own, weaknesses and vulnerabilities and fears, if we treat everybody in that way, yes, you're a valuable person. Yes, you need medical care. You're worth it. You've earned it. And yes, we still love you. Then you've that's the best you can do for anybody, whether they've got dementia or not.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, because then you'll, as you said, you'll have covered everybody. And in closing, is there any other points that you wanted to just make in summary for John's campaign as to what else that you will be doing for the rest of the year during this pandemic?
Every year, Nikki and I say to each other, I think we can stop now. I think we can stop now. And we said that last year. I think we'll just do this legal. I think we can stop now. I absolutely don't know. I would like to work with the others to get a change in the law. On the other hand, if they are paid, they do a job. I'm not, but then the other thing is the individual people who suddenly sort of ring up and they're weeping down the phone. I can't put that phone down. I think there should be other places for them to ring up and weep. But if they choose to ring up and weep to me, what can I do? So therefore, I need to keep myself up to date, so that I try not to give advice, but if I give advice, I want it to be, I want to have read the latest guidance, or I can just say to them, look, go talk to the Relatives and Residents Association. They've got a really good helpline. But, I need to, if I'm going to field individual distress, I need to have the useful knowledge. I would just like to get to a point when nobody rings up because they don't need to, because they're happy.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. Yes, absolutely. But I just wanted to thank you so much, Julie, for coming on to the Long-Term Care Chronicles and telling, your story and what is John's campaign, so everybody is aware of it and knows of it. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.